Okay, this is my week 2 presentation for Dharma2 Energy Harvesting Tech. I'm Anna Bartley. Let's get started. So, from my research over this past week, it's become pretty apparent that there are not a lot of available materials in this sense. Energy harvesting has been a concept for a while. Um, I've been seeing articles that were like back in 2000, 2012, but it seems to like kind of have disappeared after that. So my question is, what kind of caused that? Why haven't companies been investing in this, or if they have been, why isn't it available for market yet? So what I've kind of gathered so far is that basically at this point it's pretty inefficient. A lot of these devices are only generating like a millivolt or so, and it's just not really practical yet to use this stuff. Additionally, of course, is cost. We have, with the materials that we have today, um, it's the same thing. It's not generating enough power for it to be cost efficient. And additionally, there was this fabric that was charged thermoelectrically called Power Felt, but and it looked super promising, and I was trying to find if I could purchase some, but again, it just kind of fell off the rails, so something must have gone wrong, or it wasn't picked up by a business. And one Swedish company I saw mentioned that some of these materials can be really toxic, and of course, putting these on somebody's body, it has to be super, super safe. So there's a lot of things that have kind of affected this. So there's a big availability for all of this stuff. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to make it feasible. So as far as the thermoelectric generators, I had this kind of plan to stick them either under the armpit, like worn in clothes or something like that, under the armpit. But the thing is, it's not about generating heat, it's about generating temperature difference from the Seebeck effect. So I decided to try if try and see if I can make this into a watch band type of thing. So I would have tags wrapping around the wrist like a bracelet or like a watch band, and then that would feed directly into the watch. And since, something that already exists, like a Samsung smartwatch or something like that, that already has all the tech design, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel here, but it would just naturally charge it during the day and everything, and then at night it would just kind of rest, and the next day it would just charge it and charge it as it went. So, but initially I was still thinking about the iPhone, or like, smartphone of any kind. I used my phone in this example, and it takes 1440 milliamp hours, which is kind of a lot when we're trying to generate it from such a small device. And storage is kind of tricky, battery life or a capacitor or something, especially around the wrist. So I decided to follow the smartwatch trail, and the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4, the 40 millimeter one, only requires 247 milliamp hours, so that's a little bit more manageable. So I decided to follow up on that. And if you see in the image here, I have some devices up on the top, and that could be, typically I've been finding them at about 40 millimeter by 40 millimeter. So that could be an example for this. I saw a video that used the same concept, and it would have some kind of elastic that would allow it to stretch around onto the wrist without the connections breaking. The alternative, I did find a device that was very interesting that I will continue on the next slide about, and it's the Nextstream eTag HV56, which they're absolutely tiny. They're about 3 millimeter by 3 millimeter, and you can connect a bunch of them, and that was kind of my idea, as like a lattice band. So here's a little bit more on that. It generates 1.5 milliwatts at a temperature difference of 10, and as I mentioned before, 3.1 by 3.3 millimeter size, super ideal. Hot side would be about 77 could be anywhere from could be anywhere from 77 to 392 Fahrenheit, and the cold side would be 32 to 122. And, thinking practically for our environment, I averaged the highs and lows and all the temperature for this week, and it's going to be about 31 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, it is January. It's not super warm outside right now. And then, of course, the average body temperature is 97. And then, you know, inside it's going to be like 68, 70 degrees or so. So if we look at this chart over here, you can see that if we do the calculations, we're basically going to get about 50 milliwatts from outside and 10 milliwatts inside. So that's looking pretty good in terms of power generation, especially since they're so small. As you can see here, if we got 5 of these devices and put them all together, we could easily make, you know, 300 milliamp hours, and we're pretty much covered for the smartwatch. And this chart again kind of shows you here's the voltage that you'd get, and then the power in milliwatts over the temperature difference. And you know, I'm not expecting anything crazy, of course, but I'm thinking as things warm up, you know, in Texas it does get pretty hot, and I want to be able to apply this kind of across to the general public. So I think I have it mentioned on here. Yeah, so right now it's only 30 degrees, so it makes sense to have the human be on the hot side, but as, you know, things warm up a bit, you know, we get temperatures up to 100 degrees, over 100 degrees, and, you know, metal will absorb all that sunlight and take in a lot more, so I want to, if this design comes to fruition, I would want to make the band reversible. So if it's super hot outside, you just flip it around and then you become the cold and the environment becomes the hot. So that's kind of my idea for that. And here are just some other considerations. The output will need to be regulated. Buck boost, you know, this isn't, when anytime you're dealing with something analog, ambient, you gotta make sure that it's gonna be in a safe range. I did find a lot of times they mentioned in articles or videos or anything, you have to match the impedance. Otherwise, it's just going to be, you know, super low efficiency. Additionally, I did find a study done on whether you should put them in series or parallel. Some of the videos use series and some use parallel. At the end of the day, it turns out it really depends, as mentioned before, on the impedance matching. So that I won't be able to report on until I actually have a device in hand and can test. Unfortunately, those devices I mentioned earlier, the Nextream ones, they have been labeled obsolete and are discontinued. So that seems to be kind of the theme as my search goes on. There are plenty of quote unquote choices, but as far as devices that are in stock actually being manufactured and available, the pool is rather small. The most promising being the PRMT21. Basically, Matrix is a company that creates tags and has partnered with PowerWatch, and they make this watch that kind of charges itself, does its own thing, but it's kind of a luxury item, and it also uses solar power, and that, of course, it's ridiculously expensive, so it's not like an everyday user type of thing. But they do sell, they call them watch kits, so that's kind of interesting, and this is, I believe it's like a 30 millimeter by 30 millimeter piece, so that could easily fit on your wrist, and you know, we can go from there. However, they didn't seem to be selling them exactly. You could apply and tell them what your interest is and tell them what you're working on, and so I filled it out and we'll see what happens with that. But it was just kind of weird that they had all this, you know, this whole website like, oh hey, check out our parts, and then you can't actually buy any of them, so that's unfortunate. But and down here we have Tegway, which looks super, super cool. They have this ultra flexible tag fabric type stuff that looks super, super interesting, but it seems to be a Korean based like startup type thing. I was watching videos where they were able to get their hands on some of this stuff and use it, but when I went on their website, it was kind of like just a crappy, like nobody website, and I couldn't find a place to order. They had lots of different like, oh, here's what we're about, here's all of our stuff, but you couldn't actually purchase anything. So again, kind of a dead end, but I'm gonna ask around and see if I can find anything else on that. And at the end of the day, you know, if you just Google and look on Amazon, they have lots of tags, but they're all 40 millimeters, which is, you know, I want to, it doesn't have to be for kids, but I want to try to hit as many adults as I can, and I know that that would not fit on my wrist. So I'm gonna keep looking, see if I can find anything a little bit smaller. And a lot of times you have to be very careful because they'll offer like, oh, it's thermoelectric cooler, like really quietly, like under in the fine print it'll say that it's a cooler. So you have to be careful for that. But I'm still looking on all that. So let's continue. Now, the other thing I was looking into is doing like a shoe thing where you could harvest like the stepping and energy and everything. And I found a couple of interesting projects that people did. Uh, and I like piezoelectric transducers because you can do, you know, vibrating energy, striking energy, bending, you know, straightening, that kind of thing. They kind of are, since they are mechanically involved, there are a lot of different choices you can have with that. So yeah, so we have opportunities for multiple devices, and so here are a couple of the interesting ones that I found. This one, it's the same, this is the picture for that. It incorporated like discs into the sole of the shoe that responded to vibration, and when I looked up the part, it seems like it's usually used in like pickup amps for guitars and stuff, or cigar box type things. And in this case, it was kind of an amateur project. They used 7 devices in each shoe and they put them in parallel. And the thing that kind of threw me off about it was when they soldered the output directly to the battery, which I don't know, if maybe it's fine, but I just feel bad about that. I don't think that that would have gone down very well. And he or she just put the power bank like under the laces, so that's not very sexy, and I'm gonna keep looking as far as ways to store the energy. But they did rectify it and everything, since piezos are just taking in that vibration energy, so you convert it to DC and then you can actually use it. So that was a nice part of it. Another one that I saw was using the bending piezos. So in this case it was the Mauser 509 V21BL piezo module, and they used a similar rectifier from the first one, but instead of using a power bank they used a capacitor. And that seemed to work a little bit better. It was somebody that did this project for like science fair, again, kind of an amateur style. But it stored energy and they were able to get some readings and everything. And what they did was they took like a 50-pound weight and put these sensors in like a shoe that they had. And it was not very efficient. Apparently it would take like 2 billion steps just to charge a cell phone. I think that approximated to like 7 million hours of walking or something ridiculous. So these are kind of cool, but not super practical yet. And a little bit more on the research, there was a study done by some MIT guys in 2005, and they looked at, one, the bending guy, but they also looked at, it's a pre-bent, I think they called it pre-stressed piezoelectric device, so whenever you stepped on it, it would flatten it instead of curve it. So that was kind of cool, and they, of course, developed all of these devices in-house. I don't know if they're available for purchase, but they partnered with some companies and came up with some devices. And so the first one, you know, they've got all the sciencey stuff in there, but this one is the bending one that went under the ball of the foot, and so they put that in a sneaker, and they ended up with 1.3 milliwatts. And as far as efficiency goes, it was only 0.5%. So clearly the bending ones are not great. They're not really doing it. As cool as they are, it doesn't seem to be very practical. And then the second one, with the arched one that was flattened, they put that in a US Navy boot, and it actually did 8.4 milliwatts. So that's quite a bit better. And it was 20% efficient, which in terms of energy harvesting, hey, you know, we'll take it. That's a bit better. So that's a little bit more promising. And I had seen an article, I couldn't find it again, but they talked about in the military they had these boots that operated with like a lung system in the soles instead, of piezos. They did like some kind of little balloons, like some in the ball and some in the heel, and what it would do is it would suck in air as the foot lifted up, and as it pressed down it would squeeze the air and it would spin a turbine and it would generate power that way. And what they used it for was broadcasting the GPS location of the boot, essentially. So that was another thing that I looked into, but I'm not super wanting to do a more mechanical approach. But you know, I'll keep researching and seeing what else I can do. So there's a lot of inefficiency with all of these piezo stuff. Um, I have been really wanting to do a storage project, but most of these applications have been in doing like, oh, broadcasting the GPS signal, or you know, it's just sending out something small, using that energy in real time instead of saving it and using it later. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of my head just as moving forward, what my practical options are for this. But I do really want to continue with the shoe idea, but maybe instead of just doing one type of energy, maybe incorporating some bending ones at the crease and then a flattening one at the ball, since that one doesn't hit quite as hard, but there is a lot of pressure. And, you know, a loose vibration one to capture more on the edge of the foot, and then get the strike energy, as with the navy boot, to try to get a little bit more of a complete sense of the energy that's coming in. Lastly here, I know you mentioned inductive charging a little bit, and again, I just mentioned how it's not very efficient on its own. Like any one of these ideas isn't super efficient by itself, but with inductive charging, as you said, like passing the like a wrist device over to a belt and kind of having it gather charge that way. I was wondering if we do the whole shoe thing and like a watch thing and then maybe like a belt, we could gather all of that energy into one place, and that's how we can get the storage aspect going. Since we don't want these devices to get really bulky, and we don't want it to be, you know, kind of dangerous even to have, you know, like a bunch of capacitors all over your body. So I think that's something to look to also as this progresses. I would love for this to work, but I have to do a lot more research to figure out how feasible that really is. Okay, and then here's just the boilerplate stuff. I ordered some tag modules from Amazon. They're the 40x40 ones, but I do want to just get some hands-on, you know, testing going on in the meantime. It doesn't hurt to have a couple of items in advance. Amazon orders go out on Friday, so I expect to see it in 2 weeks or so. So these ordering times on these devices is going to take a really long time, so I want to get some stuff going already. Here's the budget. I added 10 hours to the labor this week and the $8.99 for the tags, and we're at $1,700. And for next week, I'm gonna meet with Dr. Gieselman again to kind of show him my progress and see what he thinks, get some more feedback from him, and hopefully get some advice on where I should head next and what is feasible and what maybe isn't going to be so great. I want to get all my devices ordered as soon as possible, but I don't want to order the wrong thing, of course. You know, that's the problem with everything. So I'm gonna talk to him and see what he says and try to get some devices picked out and ordered and just continue my research and hope that I find some actual devices to use that will be good. Here are my sources, if you're interested, and questions. I guess I didn't need that slide since I'm doing it online. And then the video link will be here. That should be it.